and welcome to the Sanctuary, a safe space to speak from the heart. It's been almost 3 years running since I've been trying to talk to this guy, but I'm finally happy to have Ryan Veltmeyer, the Executive Director of Youth Art Connection, in the Sanctuary today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Israel. I'm so glad we made it happen.
Yeah. Let's talk about Youth Art Connection. Why did you decide to start it?
Well, we were myself and then my co-founder Ann Denny. We were doing a lot of work in community with youth. I worked at the public libraries and at the HeartWood Centre for Community Youth Development, running summer camp leadership programs. And then also my other life was being a professional musician, playing in lots of bands and touring, playing trombone and singing. So we started doing arts-based programming with youth after school and that kind of thing, in part just because it was my interest and my passion. In part, life kind of like leads you down these paths that you never really understand where they're going. So there was this radio project thing we did at the library. And then I met an incredible woman named Sabina Fells who was running an arts-based after-school program and pulled me into that. And I helped her put it together, and she mentored me into this whole world of really focusing on arts-based work. I mean, all those things for me kind of all mixed together eventually to come up with this idea of an arts-based not-for-profit working with youth who have a high degree of talent, but maybe face whatever number of barriers, right, to being able to really realize their talent, realize all of their potential. Those barriers are many. I mean, even just as a musician, as an artist, like I think we live with so much stigma around our earning potential and what we can become, and why would you do that? And starving artists. There's all these ideas around being an artist from the get-go, and then add on any other kind of stigmas and barriers and stuff on top of that. And you have all these amazing creative people who are ready to change the world and ready to do just incredible things who are misunderstood or unappreciated by society. I think feeling a little bit of that myself. And then otherwise, we were always so focused on youth engagement, which I learned a lot about at the HeartWood Centre and at Y Camp growing up, where youth matter. Just because you're 15 doesn't mean you have to sit around and wait around for your whole life till you grow up or go to school or something like that. Like, young people have a lot to contribute right away. And if you, and we were really all about like recognizing that existing talent in 15, 16-year-olds, not just waiting for them to become 30 after 10 years of study or to value them then, but value them now and collaborate with those young people to take advantage of their really great ideas and their lived experience and all that knowledge, and to bring it together with artists and change makers and business people so they could really, begin being a productive and contributing member of society now and see themselves like that and see others like that. Anyway, there's a lot of other reasons all intersecting, and we had some great role models that we met in Toronto at a conference with the Arts Network for Children and Youth. I met the Remix Project, the Mickey Argent Foundation. I found out about Artscape in Toronto. So there's all these like arts-based youth and community organizations in Toronto and other parts of the country. But I hadn't really seen the same thing here. We had like Elle Jones who was doing a lot of work with youth and poetry, and Sobey Benjamin, same thing with videography and film. And there's a circus circle doing circus stuff with youth and street engaged youth. So that we had a bunch of small examples of it here, but I didn't really realize what was possible and how big this world actually is until I saw it in Toronto. And then I think once I saw that, came back to Nova Scotia. I was like, okay, I want to do that. Like I finally found something that really, really felt like me and brings all my worlds together. And I think I had to kind of see that in order to understand it or recognize, and it just was so exciting. Like, oh my God, I can work in community and work with young people and engage with them with all their brilliance and do it all with arts. Anyway, that was it's a long. I'm trying to keep it short, but I already talked for 5 minutes about that one question.
No, I mean the impact. Yeah, the impact that UDA connection has, like over the years, is visible, and like there are different programs like the Hub, Emerge, Apprenia. How do you decide what programs to create, and what is the process of creating some of these programs?
Yeah, so our four core principles, like everything kind of runs off of those, I think, for us at YAC. And so the first one is youth engagement, and then that's innovation. And youth engagement means listening to youth. And like, so a lot of the ideas, for example, for artpreneurs, that came from young people who we were working with in other contexts saying like, I'm broke, or I can't come to programs, I got to go work at Starbucks all day, or like whatever, version of I need money. And we watched them like struggling, and we had relationships with all these young people and knew that, they had this passion, this talent, and, willingness to push it and maybe even make money from it, or just have a life with, using all their artistic skills. But they just lacked kind of an understanding or a knowledge of how to operate as a professional artist. And we were both professional musicians, they're founders. So like I knew how to do that. I was like, oh, like I'd learned the hard way how to be a professional musician. And I was like, oh man, if these guys figure this out, if we can explain to them and help them understand how do you make money now, they can learn entrepreneurial thinking and that approach and see themselves as entrepreneurs and business people as well as artists. So, but a lot of us, when we're artists, like we're averse to that idea, this idea that we're a business. So honestly, a lot of it is just really about like recognizing that there's different ways to do business and there's different kinds of business. Like there's like really small, cool, values driven businesses, and you can be like that. You don't have, and like most of us artists are that, whether we want to use this word or not. We're not all Walmarts, right? We don't all have to be big neoliberalist constructions or something like that, right? Like we can be beautiful, small, sole proprietorships, and you play on the side of the street, put out a hat, and someone's chucking cash in there. That's a business, and that's your business model. Anyway, but it was youth engagement, really. So like these ideas, almost all of them came from youth, or youth complaining about not being able to access the festivals because they're either really expensive or they're happening in bars. So all their art heroes and music heroes are coming to town. They can't go because it's a licensed event or it's unaffordable. So that's why Emerge exists, right? So we were like, oh, well, what if we put together a festival that integrates professional artists and a conference even for you guys, like focusing on the topics that you're concerned about that are really relevant to your interests and to young people's musical interests or where they're at business and development wise, So Emerge exists because of the young people complaining about the lack of access to those venues. So, and every program basically is that, right? So, and Hub came about because there was nowhere to go and be around like-minded artists where we are all just artists and businessy and all encouraging each other and supporting each other. Those places are usually like studios and cafes and small spots all over the place. Like us artists, we gather and convene in the most random places. So
that's very true.
So Hub was really an attempt to be like, well, look, here's a one spot at least, or once a week, where we can all get together to help each other, whether it's like business or mental health or just connecting to people who vibe with you because you have a creative mind.
And before COVID, there were like specific days people would meet at the Hub.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we've been pretty inactive during COVID. Unfortunately, we kind of ramped things back up in the fall again, and then got hit with that second wave. So we're just kind of, I miss it so much. I think all of our staff in our community does. So we're looking at kind of getting organized and reopening here eventually at some point to get together in person. But I mean, before that, Wednesday nights was the big night. And we would do a lot of things like shows and performances sometimes. And again, these are all young people, all these artists hanging out together being like, why aren't we performing? So then we're like, all right, cool. Like, let's do a show series. Or like mentorships, having artists come in to do a bit of a talk or just hang out and just kind of like get to know different creatives and how they work. The T. Thomason and Ben Kaplan and a bunch of different people came through. And I mean, Renee Smith's always come through for Emerge a bunch. But also like grantors, like we would have folks from the provincial government, from Community Cultures and Heritage and Arts Nova Scotia and these different groups come in to explain what their programs were and like how do you access that and what do you have to do to be able to access funds. Or business people coming in explaining like just business strategies and that kind of thing. Or social justice, Dorico Simons came in and really talked about, how, you can leverage creativity and ideas and spoken word to address injustice in the world. So, and again, these are just topics that all those topics and these artists are based off of the interests or the problems that like our members identified and what they were. So Hub's always kind of like our specific activities changed all the time.
Yeah.
And honestly, sometimes it was just hanging out. It was just like 20, 30 people in a room having a big, intense conversation. And like Mage and Chevy Price and some of the artists who really created that space and defined it for us. Like they were, like I obviously helped a lot every time I could in the background. I'm really passionate about it, but it was really their leadership and their design and their kind of like setting the cultural tone of like how we're going to be together. I'm very like, when I'm doing youth stuff, I used to be anyway, very kind of organized. I want to have like a circle and do things on a really strict schedule. And like, this is my training, but I quickly found out when Chevy Mage like really got me to stop doing that and to back off. And they're like, no, dude, you're killing the vibe. So anyway, so they really established this amazing culture. And like, it was just so joyous, and we were as likely talking about, arguing about basketball or art or having fun or talking about what we were doing as we were to like engage in talks about systemic racism or homophobia. I was really so impressed with that environment they created where you could go from these big, deep, intense topics to fun topics to sharing to spontaneous cipher, just this creative, joyous environment. And, I'm talking a lot about it because I miss popping into that every now and then or just knowing it.
But like when COVID happened, we YAC Connection kind of did like an online version, and Mage was running that. What was the idea behind that pivot, at least for the couple of weeks when things were done online?
Yeah, we did Instagram Live basically at the same time for about 2 or 3 months when COVID began. I think like we ran Hub like every day, every Wednesday, like no matter what, pretty much for about 2 or 3 years. I think we'd take 2 weeks off for Christmas, but like, we would run out of funding and just keep going. And I think we all really wanted to be like consistent. And so we're like, this is an important space. This is like needed and it's joyous, whether there's 5 people there or 50. And so like, I just don't think any of us, like Mage, myself, anybody knew how to stop. So like, pandemic happens and we're like, God, like we got to do something. And Mariah Pelly Smith was working with us at the time as well. So she created all those beautiful graphics from all the marketing and promo stuff. So basically Mariah, Mage and I, between, some of us were volunteering and most of us were laid off from volunteering at that point or collecting CERB. And then Mariah had a couple hours left in her contract that we had paid for. Anyway, this is the businessy behind the scenes stuff, but basically we wanted to keep going to connect with those community, those artists, and Mage did a phenomenal job. I have to say, like a few of those are saved on the Hub page and watchable, but and we did that for a while, but and after a while summer came and I think we all got a bit exhausted from everything online and it wasn't quite the same. And so I think then Mage decided, let's just take a break for a while and just do other stuff and do other activities and we'll get Hub back in person when we can, kind of thing.
There's this organic feel to actually having the person there. And then we pretty much immediately had to go from meeting people in person to like going, especially on Zoom, to chat. And there's a slight disconnect there. So even though all, the Hub was doing a lot online, it helped that people knew that, okay, we had to keep this going. But then it's like, okay, we have to take a step back and analyze things. One thing, actually, I'll come back to the Hub, but before I come back to the Hub, let's talk about you and the trombone. Like, how did you get into music and why the trombone? That's the one you do like that, right?
Yeah, the slide, yeah. Yeah, I'll try to find you a clip if you want.
Yes, please.
An old one of me playing trombone. There's a couple on the internet.
Okay.
They're kind of embarrassing for me a little bit because they're so old. It was my 27-year-old self. And anyway, but it was such a fun time.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, at the beginning, it was just like a school thing, something to do with school. And like I was an all right student and stuff in junior high and high school, but I didn't really know this yet. But I was really like an entrepreneur and musician and artist, as in, uh, I eventually just had so much challenge, I think, like learning about abstract stuff that was all sort of theoretical, just sitting there trying to absorb and accumulate knowledge that didn't really have an application yet. Like I understood as a kid, you're like, all right, well, I'm just learning stuff because that helps me become an adult eventually. Like,
Yeah.
all right. But like music, when you learn music, it's like, can you play that note? Yes or no? Like, when you're in a band, are you contributing to it? Is it, there's just like instant feedback, and your test is like, go play a gig, whether that's in high school or, like one of those school concerts or something else. So I really think, so in school at the beginning, I think I was so attracted to it because it was like with other people and it was fun, and there was adventure. We could go on tours and stuff, or be able to even just skip the class to go and play a show at a competition, like whatever was going on through the school. And it was just like, I wanted to do all of it. It was way more, I just had so much fun, it was like so fun compared to the other kinds of learning I was experiencing in school. So I think that was my original draw. And then eventually I started to get like good, and got some skill. And there was this moment at a festival, and I got a big compliment when I was playing tuba for this orchestra. And then suddenly everybody was telling me I should go to music school. And I was like, oh, music school, what's that? And like, yeah, you can like literally go to university and study it. And if you practice and audition, you can get scholarships and stuff like that to get in, to be able to afford it and everything. And anyway, so I did all that, and I practiced my butt off and got into some schools and started studying, became a professional musician. It was just, it wasn't really the plan from that get-go or for me or anything. I was just like, I followed my gut and my joy and that kind of thing, and just no idea what an artist was like. I didn't really consider myself an artist for a long time. Yeah.
Why not?
Once I went through, at the end of that school journey, basically, then I just got involved as a trombone player. Like, I figured out that I didn't really like the orchestra world and that whole classical world. It wasn't really for me. It wasn't my vibe. So, and that's what school was training me for. So there was kind of a disconnect there. So really I found myself, I think, as a musician afterwards, being in community, playing in bands and choirs and writing music and composing, and where it was like fun and people again and interacting, and not in those formal stuffy settings, where it's more athletic kind of playing, but more like expressive and fun, and in bars and parties and events and festivals. And I found my joy there, to be honest.
I really look forward to those clips. It'd be cool to see. Like, I mean, when you were, when you joined the school band, did you have a choice on what instrument to play? And if you did, why did you decide to choose the trombone?
So I moved a couple times when I was a kid. We used to move a lot, and I played clarinet for a year actually. But then I moved back into town where I had some of my old friends from St. Catherine's School, and we were all at Fairview Junior High in Halifax. And when I got there, and suddenly there was a band again, but they had started it in grade 7 instead of grade 6. And so I was like, oh, well, I don't really want to be away from my friends with the older kids playing clarinet because I was ahead a year. So I was like, I'll play some new instrument and start over. Socially, I was a very social kid. I wanted to be with my friends. And then I don't know, I was going to play something else, and 3 or 4 of my friends were going to play, drums or saxophone or something. But then, it's just band teacher, grade 7. This teacher's like, oh my God, I have no brass. And he's just like, please, somebody play brass, and just kind of begging us. We're just like these kids, like they're 12-year-olds, just being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, so 3 of my friends and I were like, all right, let's play trombone. That looks cool. Like, sure, let's just do that. So we begged the class, and 3 of us put up our hands. And we're like, let's be the trombone section, and that's kind of how that all started.
Oh man, I actually do like it. So I usually say the trombone and the trumpet, they're kind of overlooked, but when it's used right, it sounds so good. It sounds so good. Especially, sometimes I don't know what that thing is called, but like you're playing the trumpet and then you have like a cup in front of the thing.
Yeah,
I love that sound. I love that sound. I don't know, but I fucking love that sound.
I bet it's the harmony you're probably thinking, like the Miles Davis stuff, and like
there you go.
Yeah, harmony mutes. Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of mutes you can stick in your bell, but I think that harmony meets the cool jazz sound that like got so ubiquitous and famous.
Yeah, friggin' love it. So you said that, even back then you were kind of like an artist and you were seeing it as a business. In what way for you?
Uh, I think I just like loved playing so much. I was just kind of doing what everyone told me to do as far as like I had no idea how to be a musician at all, like zero, right? I liked playing music, but playing music and like expressing yourself and getting good at playing is very different from like, having a career and living as a musician. And in the
Mm,
worlds I was in university and stuff, like no one was teaching me how to be a musician. They were just teaching me how to play, and how to read and like all these hard skills. Uh, so for a long time, I was just like playing, and then when I moved into music composition, I was just writing. It's just like it was a really joyous time, to be honest. I lived in this house with all these really weirdos in Wolfville, like in this kind of it was a very like jockey sort of town at the time, right? Really sports and football, small town. So kind of us weirdos, artsy people with like long hair and weird clothes and stuff, we all kind of found each other and then lived in this bizarre house that was very chaotic. Like it's almost like a psychedelic dream when I think about it now. Um, just like and creating instruments and like soldering stuff and like almost setting things on fire and like there was an artist living with us and she would like paint this painting and throw it in the backyard and destroy it and then pick it back up and paint it again and it was just we just had this like a year or two there where anything you could be anything like this the liberation I think of us all
mm,
accepting this identity as weirdos and artists and then leaning into it. It
mm.
was just like so like no it was a different time too, right? So no phones, no social media yet. There was no people like yelling at each other online, and like none of that existed, right? So we are just very with each other, present, just creating and making together, without
Mm,
any worldwide distractions. We're in Wolfville, this tiny town, not much access to the outside world for like news. It's very like incubating. Kind of you're in
hmm.
this like you create your own world when that happens. I think and you're
Yeah,
disconnected from everything else.
yeah.
So I know that was for me like that we really formed as artists and creative humans at that point. And then
Mm.
the business stuff all came much later. So after I graduated school, and for me that was much more related to like sitting in my room with an existential dilemma at 25, not knowing what I'm going to do with my life.
Isn't it too early to have that?
Oh yeah, no, I was 22 to 27. I was just like I was very introverted, right? I was very shy, very sensitive. So I'm not like out there hustling, meeting people, trying to go in like venues and give them a card. That was not me. I was just like a introvert, weirdo trombone player, and to be honest, I used alcohol a lot and like and stuff like that, like to sort of self-medicate around anxiety, social anxiety. So like,
Mm,
so for a long time, I would kind of pretend that like drinking and that kind of thing was like this fun, cool musician thing to do. But actually, I was just kind of so terrified at the beginning of playing
mm,
and meeting people in an introvert, like in an extrovert world and profession. Like I kind of used alcohol
yeah.
a lot to kind of deal with myself there. So it wasn't a very healthy setup for a long time,
Mm,
until later on when I realized, I was like, oh, okay, like I keep telling myself I'm networking and by drinking as a part of it, but like you don't remember anything if you drink too much. Like
yeah,
there was no
that's
networking
true.
going on that I could remember anyway, right? So
Yeah.
just yeah, just full transparency on that one. That was quite a struggle to stop drinking like that, and just so I think once I stopped drinking though, once I kind of calmed down a bit and rooted myself and dealt with my existential dilemma and got more into
Mm,
youth work. Like I think I just got a lot of grounding from just like working with teenagers and youth with HeartWood and then the libraries and stuff. And I think that kind of helped me like calm down a little bit and realize I was going to be okay maybe. And I always had youth work, even if me being a musician didn't work out because it was so scary for me in a lot of ways.
mm,
But then once I got rooted, I think then I kind of discovered a new way of feeling about art and stuff, right? I had a little bit of security and that kind of thing.
mhm,
Yeah, and it wasn't until even after that, I didn't really wrap my head around being a business as an artist till I was more like 28, 29. And then I
mm,
started getting very serious about bands and music. And I eventually quit my secure full-time job at the library in Spryfield as the teen guy because I really wanted to go tour and in the late 2000s in Halifax was like a really cool music scene. It was kind of like the Arcade Fire era and all these kind of folk musicians and stuff that I was a part of, this whole scene in the North End.
mhm,
It was really cool. Yeah, for 5 or 6 years, there's all these singer songwriters and all of us kind of a huge, like really cool, like wave of us kind of coming through, I think. And I was in like 10 bands and playing the
Wow.
jazz fest and touring and playing with the indie bands and reggae bands and just like whoever needed horns, basically,
Yeah, yeah.
And then it was fun. And then I started thinking about money and like having agents and stuff like that, and starting to be like, oh, okay, like, and watching my bank account and noticing that on a tour we were lucky if we broke even. Most of the time you're losing money. But just started thinking about money at that point, right? And quite late. That's also why I'm so passionate about helping artists now. Like, think about, you just develop, even if you're not great at business, just developing the entrepreneurial mindset, right? So that you
Yeah.
can at least understand that you're an entrepreneur as an artist,
Yep.
and you can get that understanding. It's an easy understanding to develop. It's not difficult. It's just, you just need someone to hold your hand a bit and walk you through it, or people like me certainly did, because I had no clue. So you can do that with people when they're like 12, 15, I think. And I just think helping people understand like what entrepreneurism is in context to being an artist, and how do you kind of mitigate or bring those two worlds together, like just that learning and that like approach
Yeah.
and that just the mentality is just so essential. And maybe it's different now, but like no one's teaching us anything like that. It was just kind of, you figured it out or you didn't, and you succeeded or you didn't, but there's no help at all, anything like that.
And that's a good bridge, a conduit that youth art connection is giving the youth these days. Because actually had Jaden Austin in the sanctuary a couple of days ago,
Oh,
and
cool.
talked about his experience in the Apprenia program. And like one thing he mentioned that he always came back to was like, what is his value? Like, what are his values? And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
wow, if you have a program that teaches you how, like, okay, start with what your value is and then build from there. That's a great program. So I'd like to talk about Apprenia. It's in this year's version that is now online. So
Yeah.
let's talk about how it started and what is different with this year since it's online.
Yeah. I'm glad Dayton talked about values, because and that's a free secret, just giving it away to all the business education people in the world, that when we started Entrepreneurs at the beginning, it was just 4 youth that we experimented a bit with, and then we grew it pretty quickly the next year up to 15, 16, and that was quite like a really cool cohort. But at the beginning, when we didn't have any curriculum or programming yet, right? So we were just like looking around to see what was out there. Like, there's this business model canvases, and there's a bunch of different kind of tools, and then we kind of put that together with our own experiences to develop like a basic approach and a curriculum for how do you teach business to artists. And one of the first things we really narrowed down on pretty fast by the second or third round was that we had to start off every program talking about values, or some word that means that for people, right? Because I think a lot of traditional business programs and approaches don't necessarily even ever get to speaking about values, or if they do, it's usually late. Versus, I think most of us need to like have that conversation immediately.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, a lot of us are very critical thinkers, I think, right? And you grow up like thinking, like you become an artist. If you're becoming an artist, like people have like begged you not to because you're going to be poor, like, because of that
Yeah.
stigma. So we've
Yeah.
already made a
Yeah.
decision, like, screw money, like I'm going to do this, like, regardless. Like, so
Hmm.
that's who you're dealing with, and you're dealing with an artist usually.
Yeah.
And that usually means that they have, like, for me especially, and I know a lot of others, like a complicated relationship with money and with income, and with like this idea of selling out, or just that kind of I think all of us look at the corporate world of just like making money no matter what as the main priority, as like kind of depressing.
Yeah.
So you need to discuss values, so that the main thing is that so people understand, like, how do you want to make money if you're going to be an artist making money and making income? Like, how are you going to do that so you still get to feel really good about your art the whole time? And if you don't sort out the question and you don't really think that through and come up with a big list of the ways that is cool to make money for you and the ways that's not cool, if you don't like really sort yourself out on that, then it can be really hard. Like, you might get a great money opportunity and then just say yes because you're so broke and you need the cash, but then like
Yeah.
afterwards realize you compromised your values and your art was misrepresented you, and you maybe were part of something you didn't really want to be, and then you feel terrible, and living with that crappy feeling is just not worth the money, like, for most artists. So
Yeah.
to make that decision, you have to work through all those values. anyway, yeah. So that was such a big part of it. A lot of the other learning is pretty standard. It's pretty, like thinking about your idea and your elevator pitch and your audience. The only other, the really big thing that we did at the beginning, again too, is like really try to center real artists. And because of the youth engagement archer model, you were always trying to make sure that whoever's teaching it kind of reflects the people and the community and the art types and stuff like that of the learners, right? So that first and second cohort, there's a lot of hip hop kids in it, for example. And I just met Chevy Price actually. And so Chevy, I was trying to convince at the beginning to be in the program. I was like, oh, cool. Like she seems dope. Like maybe she'd like learn business stuff. But I talked to her for a couple of minutes and she was still like 18 or something like that, or 19. But, it was pretty clear pretty quickly that she was like going to be a very good educator and a teacher and that kind of thing. So I think after 10 minutes, I was like, actually, maybe we could find some money and pay you to help kind of mentor and teach this program with us. So I think that was always just really important for the approach the entire time, right? So if you have a bunch of hip hop kids, I can teach them business. I can give them some basic business knowledge, but I'm not like a hip hop head. I'm a trombone player. I'm something else. So like we really, we knew, okay, we got to find like more like a rapper or like a producer or something like that to like teach these kids who are into hip hop, because they're just I might be the nicest guy or whatever with some decent information, but I think it's just harder to learn. It's easier to learn, especially for youth, when you're trying to figure out your values and all this stuff, if people reflect your art form and your identity.
Yeah.
So that was always like quite important. And when we strayed away from that, like it's never been as good. And I've tried lots of different kinds of instructors, but I'm like, oh man, like now it works way better when the instructor is really relevant to them, even if they're newer at teaching.
And then what's the changes for this year's version as online?
Yeah, well, yeah, so we had to figure that out with COVID, right? We had been developing an app and some of that stuff anyway to try to like take advantage of online resources and spaces.
Yeah.
And then it forced it last year. So we had to cancel all these other things we were doing and just switch to trying to figure out how to teach online. But I was pleasantly surprised. So I just helped run that first version of it in the fall, and now Chevy's running it again with an assistant, Bailey, from NASCAD. And they're running it now at this moment online. I was actually really pleasantly surprised that you can actually have a genuine connection with people, and because a lot of the learning, honestly, besides the knowledge and the stuff you're getting, it's really about networking. It's a social opportunity, a social learning environment, and for people who like to learn socially and with others, and like who absorb information better in those kinds of settings, like that's really what it's about. And it wasn't super clear, like is that going to work online? Are we going to have that social cohesion and that peer support?
Yeah.
We just didn't know, but honestly, I was like, oh no, I think like we just adapted by the time we started it in the fall, but like it was working, and it was an amazing group of young artists that I got to work with in the fall, and they have another great cohort now. And actually, there's like 20 or 30 people who we couldn't let in just because of numbers, but like they're all really cool and all really qualified. So now we're also trying to figure out, okay, maybe we should just start doing like Hub, but like an online drop-in for everybody who we would love to be in the program, but we just couldn't pick them this round, or maybe alumni.
Yeah.
So we're brainstorming also all this other stuff too. So the course is running fine online. It's cool. People are learning, creating products. We always have an event for entrepreneurs at the end where people present and sell their stuff, so they can actually practice making money in the program. So that'll still all happen, online events and everything.
Wow.
But so the same problem though now is like, where do you go after and where do you hang out after? We've created like a Discord channel, so to maybe try to start building an entrepreneurs community in there.
Okay.
I haven't really posted that or announced it yet. It's just alumni who are starting to go in there, and we're just playing around in there a bit. So that maybe that grows and becomes quite a big kind of like vibey scene, where we can all use Discord. And Discord's like a chat program, right, that gamers created, but now kind of the rest of us are all kind of like being, oh, that's cool. Actually, it's not like Facebook or Instagram where it's like social, where you're public and you're telling your story to the whole world or your friends. It's more like you're in a room together or in a building together and just hanging out. So
it's like especially when you're working with cohorts, it's great. I just found out about Discord myself recently. Ryan, you're a very busy person, and I know you have lots on the go, because we had to actually pause a bit because you were on a call, and you have another call to go on to now. But before I let you go, you touched on the two principles of YAC, of Utah Connection. So you touch on youth engagement and innovation. I'd like you to end this by talking a little bit more about partnerships and diversity and why that's important to you, that connection.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back to that. Yeah, so our core pillars have been youth engagement, innovation, diversity, and partnerships. And we made those values after a couple of years of doing things, and we looked back and said, what are the essential ingredients for like how our programs run, and what are the things that really make us successful that if we take any of them away, would kind of break our model. And I explained youth engagement and innovation as being creative. And to me, the word innovation or creativity, it's like, don't just do the same old program or same style just because that's what's been done before. Like, be open to trying new things, which is really good for youth, right? Because youth have new ways of doing things all the time. And if you know that, you just let them do what they want, like they'll run with it. So diversity, we've always just tried to bring together different minds, different life experiences, different ages, different cultural backgrounds, different art types, all into the room. I think I learned in my youth engagement practice earlier that when you form a new group of people together, or you're building a community, if people are all very similar to each other and kind of come from similar backgrounds and whatever that means in that group, there's kind of like a set culture that's already there that ends up like really taking over. Like that'll be the dominant culture, right? If eight out of 10 people all are from the same neighborhood, like it's going to feel like that neighborhood, or like in the room. But when you really try to really intentionally diversify it, so bringing people together who are quite different from each other in many ways, the impact and everyone has to kind of like, it forces everybody to kind of like make their own new standards, right? And figure out, okay, how are we going to be together and like form a new culture that is its own sort of thing. So it gives everyone a chance to also define who they are, right? And establish it, a bit of a negotiating going on. And it really works with arts. And I would say this to people because it might look like we do all these different programs and many different things, but at the end of the day, it's like there's this shared feeling, I think, that artists have with each other. And when we see each other, like we can really recognize each other quickly in a different kind of way, right? So I always saw like a hub, emphasizing like, age diversity or community diversity or cultural diversity or, whatever, but really everyone walked into that room because they were like making things and creating things and trying to build successful lives or make change with their art. Yeah. So it's cool because it's like the diversity part is like awesome. You're bringing all these different life experiences, all different walks of life. But then everyone realizes like, oh, we're actually like, we all walk into the room first as artists, right? And then second as whatever other identities you carry, right? So, and the other thing too, like around diversity in arts is that both artists and entrepreneurs, like individuality is like extremely valuable and important, right? Yeah. Like you might have groups where people like identify together as a group, but often our own personal story and our own personal journey is like really important to your artistic practice. So like individuality and uniqueness is like super valuable in arts, right? So it kind of helps us, I think, also just deal and sort out with like, stigma and racism and these kind of like ideas where you're attacking people for being different. There's a lot of that going on in the world, obviously. Yeah. But I really feel like artists have a different way where we can like, see each other. I guess, it's not always true, but certainly in our community it was true. See each other, recognize each other, connect with each other first as that creative mindset, and then you come together afterwards, like with all of your differences, which are all really celebrated. And they're part of your value pitch. If you're, if I'm going to go and try to make money, then I want to tell everyone about the things that make me different from other people, right? That I play bass trombone, or I played in these weird bands, or what have I done differently, or who am I that's different than other people? And I need to like emphasize that if I want to get gigs. Yeah. So that's to me, like diversity like brings in so much impact like that, right? And even the collective impact that we have all together, right? If we have all these different perspectives, you end up like having less blind spots too. So a group of us might try to do something, but if we don't have really enough diversity, then we're totally going to miss some opportunities or some ideas where someone else is like, oh, I know somebody from this group who could help us out, or, oh guys, no, we should do it this way. Like, and because the pooled knowledge when you have a diverse room is like crazy, and the networks and stuff like that. It's like you have a lot of access to all these ideas and worldviews and power that will stop people from making mistakes, that'll educate each other, that will like make the outcomes better, that will take advantage of bigger networks. And it's just like, it makes sense business wise, it makes sense social impact wise, it makes sense community wise, like always to me to like emphasize that, and to always be working on the skills that you need in order to integrate all these different people, because it can be challenging, right? People don't understand each other and don't feel like each other. That can lead to conflict too. So it's also have to be continually working on, conflict resolution and integration and communication and all these skills that help us, connect with each other across, those barriers, those differences.
Oh, Ryan, the way you are, I guess, what you're doing with URA Connection is important. As myself, I'm thinking, like if I had such a foundation years ago, I think I'd be at a different trajectory now for sure.
Me too.
So the work you're doing is important. Thank you for doing it, and for the team at URA Connection, Marjay, Chevy Price. But like for people watching and listening, where can they check out URA Connection?
Yeah, probably the most active place is going to be on Instagram. So at Youth Art Connection. And we're on Facebook at the same thing, at Youth Art Connection, and Twitter a little bit. But Twitter, we're usually talking to business partners and that kind of thing. But Instagram, we're talking to artists and youth and stuff like that. And we update the website fairly often if you want to get more of a background or a history and see more of the staff and the board who like how it all works. And that stuff's all at youthartconnection.ca.
Yeah,
I need to update that too, because our list of partners is a couple of years old. So I'm like,
it looks great. It's like a really, really, really well thought out plan and super pretty website. Ryan, thank you so much for coming to the sanctuary and giving me so much of your time. I'm really, really grateful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Israel. It's really great to be here.